We had some technical difficulties here, but we are hopefully going to move forward now. Just want to make yep, Scott's and Sean are on, and Aaron's here, and so I think we've got all our presenters. Craig, will you please start recording?
Done.
Thank you. All right, Carol, take it away.
Yeah. Good evening. Welcome to the BPAC on September 7th. This is Carol Fink with the State of Alaska Department of Health. I am chairing because Daryl Hess is excused from tonight's meeting. And I'm having trouble telling who's on. So if I'm going to do a little roll call, and if you can answer, that would be great. So Matt Johnson. Eric Gurley.
Present.
Steve Shell. Chelsea.
I'm here, and just Carol, so you know, Emily Weisner is the new, or Weiser, excuse me, is the new bike anchorage seat. Steve Shell is no longer in that spot.
Okay. And Emily, I see you're here, so that's great.
Yes, present.
Carrie. Sean Miller.
Yes, I'm here.
Lindsay. All right, and I know CB Brady was also excused for this evening. So Joni, do we have quorum?
I think so. Yes, I think we need 5.
Okay. So I guess we're already called to order then. And then Craig, are you doing our public involvement announcement?
Well, I certainly can. All AMATS meetings are open to the public. The public will be invited to comment. We will start with business items, have presentation by staff or a consultant. At that point, the committee will be given an opportunity to discuss the matter. And after every business item, we'll ask for comment from the public. I'm looking at the people that are dialed in right now, and I don't see any other members of the public here right now, but we'll make sure to ask just in case. After the public comment, we'll come back to the committee for their deliberation.
No, John is with the committee. We do have one member of the public here, James Mason. Is that correct?
Excellent.
And Craig, I'm just double checking. We do have quorum at 5 people. Is that correct?
Well, I'm counting. I don't know who's in the room, right? How many members are in the room?
John's here, John Miller.
Oh, Lindsay is here.
And Lindsay's here as well
And
now.
So 6 should be.
Okay, so we're good. Okay.
If you have 2 in the room, you're good.
Okay, thank you.
And it looks like you have Lindsay on. It shows here as Lindsay is dialing in, so yeah.
Yeah, I'm here. Sorry to be late.
No problem.
Okay, welcome. All right, we have an agenda in front of us. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
This is Lindsay. I'll move to approve.
Any discussion or anybody want to add anything? And I would like to acknowledge a letter that the BPAC members received today. I'm not sure, Craig, when the best time to put that on there. Would that go under committee comments?
I don't know what the letter is, what you're referring to.
It's a letter that we received from Mark Grober about promoting NACTO affiliation and guidelines. I just want to make sure it was reflected in the records.
Yeah, I guess under either committee comments, I'm not, yeah.
Or public comment?
No, well, yeah, it should be under public comments. That's a public comment. Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so I'll bring that up then when we had that chance. All right, there's my puppy dog. So we've got a motion to approve the agenda. Are there any more discussions about the agenda? Any opposition to approving the agenda? All right, we'll approve the agenda by no opposition. And next up, we've got approve. Oops, it just moved, but I think that was to approve the
Sorry.
minutes from our last meeting.
Yep, so the minutes are up now on the screen. I know you all read.
Does anybody?
Can we verify who just joined, given it's only a phone number?
Yeah, hi everybody. This is Matt. Sorry I'm late. I'm having issues with my computer, and so joining by iPhone, and it was a little bit challenging. So, but yeah, it's me.
Hi, welcome, Matt.
Thank you.
Thanks for paying attention to that. I appreciate it. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
This is Eric. I so move.
Do we have a second out there?
I'll second.
Sounded like Matt.
Yeah.
Okay, great. It's hard. And so with that, is there any opposition to approving the minutes? Hearing none, we will approve the minutes. And that brings us back to our agenda, which was a letter that we had discussed at our last meeting, and then with some help from our friends up in Fairbanks, a model letter was finished off by Daryl, I believe. He's signed this. Joni, do we need to formally approve this letter?
Yes, I think the committee should formally approve the letter. There was some discussion at the policy committee about removing the word dangerous from the code revisions themselves. But since then, we have heard that that came from Wolfgang Young at the policy committee with DOT. And since then, we have heard that the DOT commissioner has approved the code revisions as is. So it's my staff recommendation that you go ahead and approve the letter as it's written, and then the DOT commissioner and his staff can sort out if they want to recommend a different word than dangerous. But that's a staff recommendation, but you are welcome to do as you like. So so the motion would be to approve the letter as written, or to decide if you want to. The motion at the policy committee was to remove the word dangerous, and I can point out where it was to you. It was in where the heck was it? It's down here.
Well, I would,
Go ahead, Lindsay.
yeah, based on what you said, Joni, that
Here.
as it's written, it could move forward. I would just move that the BPAC adopts this letter as written.
Okay. Yeah, this is where it was here and this is revisions to the code again, and not in the actual letter that you guys wrote. So.
Okay, so it's not our letter that they were discussing. It was
Right.
the code. So,
Exactly.
all right.
Yeah.
So Lindsay's got moved. Did we get a second?
I can second it.
This is
It's
Chelsea.
John.
Oh, great.
Both of us.
I heard two voices. I recognize Chelsea's out there. Is the other voice Carrie?
No, it was John.
Oh, John, thank you. All right. And so any further discussion about this letter? All right. Is there any opposition to approving this letter as written? Not hearing any opposition, it's approved. All right, what's up next on our agenda?
Great. So up next is the, sorry, I know you don't have it in front of you anymore. It is the presentation by Scott and Sean on the 85th percentile rule, and they have some other pedestrian topics they wanted to cover. So I'm gonna, I guess I'm gonna hand over control of my screen once I figure out how to do that here. To let Scott, I think it's Scott, are you presenting?
I do have some materials, if I can just share screen.
Yes, yeah. You should be able to just click on the share content button up there and take control.
Oh, excellent. Okay. Yes, go ahead and request control.
I'll give that a shot. And Sean and I probably want to ask first how about this topic, because we have like 3 topics we could cover that are related to speed and safety for non-motorized users. But first, I think we'll just focus on speed. And Sean, how would you like to ask about the agenda or go over the agenda?
I think let's discuss, we were asked to discuss sort of speed and speed sign postings and the 85th percentile rule, and we can talk about that. We have information on sort of crash data and things that are being done and things that can be done to help enhance safety, and we can talk about that if you want to go over that today. And we can address any questions you have. But we've been, we were working on this to pull it together, and hopefully we can answer some questions about speed and the 85th percentile rule and other safety issues related to traffic speeds, basically. I believe that was what we were being asked to do. So, and feel free if you have questions, we'll stop and make sure that we can answer any questions you may have.
We'll focus on the speed question, and I didn't really get it as a question from the agenda. I wanted to tell you that I've got about 11 example pages here. I could speak to you about laws and policy and how we measure the things we're supposed to measure to come up with a recommended speed limit. And why it's not a simple number. There are some simple numbers in law, but I could show all these, but maybe Joni or the BPAC committee could tell me, is there a specific question you want me to get to?
Joni, I'm just thinking about last time, hi Scott,
Hi.
Carol Fink, with the 85% rule, there just seems like I think, at least I'm familiar with it, and I've had some professional development on that area, but sometimes there seems like there should be an exception to the 85th% rule. And the examples that were given were like Abbott Road by Service High School, or Golden View Drive by Golden View Middle School, or the old sewer behind Potter's Marsh. And like, yeah, we get it that you're using all this data in this 85% rule, but sometimes when you look at the context of what the road is and the land use planning around that road, is there a way to accept that road and get a lower speed limit? So that was kind of where I remember the discussion going. Joni, do you have anything to add?
No, nothing to add. I think if Nancy Keys is on I don't think I see her on the on our chat or on our meeting attendees, but she had brought it up as a question to, what that means, and, because they've heard that a lot. And so she just thought a more in-depth explanation, I think, of, what the 85th percentile rule is and how it's used to make decisions in transportation would be helpful for the committee to hear. So.
Well, that helps a discussion, plus some example roads. That helps too, because we can talk about why some roads are different. And so I'm going to try to remember those examples, and I'll show you what goes into it real quick. There isn't an 85% rule. It's not the rule. It's one of a whole bunch of things we consider. And you were right to mention context and adjacent land use. I'm going to go to that part of the statute instead, and then we'll jump around. Let's see. So there's And you can, if this is hard to see, you can control zoom or zoom in. I will try to blow this up a little bit. Alaska statute 19 for transportation, 0.10 says, by law, this is the procedure we follow for determining a speed limit. And number 4 I highlighted is where we measure vehicle speeds. And someone could say that's the 85th percentile speed. That these are in priority order, it says in the statute. That's not our number 1 criteria. And it's not just the 85th. The stuff we measure under item 4 is how the whole group looks, like we're grading a class or something. And any law is only as good as everybody, willing to obey it. The way I look at all the data we measure, it's not just 85th. It is, and I'll show you more on context, but when we do measure just the motorist portion of things, it's kind of like a bell curve in school, and the 85th percentile is this kind of this upper end where someone might get a B plus or an A minus, and everybody less than that is reasonable, safe, law abiding. They're not out to cause any harm. They're judging what they see and they think they're doing a good job. And we all think that's most of us. But we all know that on the top of the group we measure, every day there's somebody who doesn't care. We've changed the signs. We've made in lower speed signs, and they don't care. They'll go as fast as they want. So that's what I've circled in red on the right. They're the people that are aggressive enough. They're taking chances and probably putting other people at risk and probably need a ticket or pulled over. And then on the lower end of the scale, we have sometimes a forklift driving down the road that just doesn't belong on like the freeway or something, And so that's not good. What we're trying to do is all be about the same. Is there a question there then? I just heard somebody. Okay. So this is what we do measure, but it's only one factor. And let me see if I can tell you, no matter what we do, when you mentioned Old Seward Highway and the spur behind Potter Marsh, it is falling apart, right? And we're going to have to repave it. And there's a rule above all rules called the basic rule. No matter what we put up for a sign, drive for icy roads, snowy roads, pothole roads, and drive accordingly. And most people do. You'll even the Glen Highway, as aggressive as the freeway gets on a really bad day, people actually slow down. But they need to do it, with more care. So the Old Seward Highway there, we did hear from the community and community council. We went out, and the road is not even drivable at most of its length as a smooth road at the speed limit. So we put up warnings and advisory speed for conditions. We can't change the speed limit every month or every week that conditions change. So we did put up warnings. When we repave that road, it's going to be a pretty nice surface, and it's back to what it was. And we'll get into more about what we evaluate, but besides the basic rule, then the state code tells us that there's just a few choices that are default. Those don't have studies. And then the last part I want to let you know is you can alter that under another piece of state code, and that's what it says on the bottom here. And then that code, when I switch to that, it says a city can alter a speed limit, the state can on the roads that we manage, but it has to be on an engineering and traffic investigation. We can't just vote it in what we wish it could be. We have to do a data-driven study. And what that means is you've heard about the MUTCD and that it might cite 85th. I'll show you its language. It just says there has to be an engineering study, and that study is defined as a written report. It has to hold up in court in any crash. And so it's not something we get to pick lightly. And we looked at this statute that said 85th and all the other measurements we take of motorists is priority 4. It's not priority 1. It's just what you guys asked me in the beginning was, what about the neighborhood, the context? Is there parks next door? Is there high density use? When you drive along Tudor, we're all seeing it, the high pedestrian crash area, Lake Otis to Piper. on pieces of Muldoon Road, the density of access picks up, the conflicts pick up. Most drivers get that cue, and they actually do drive slower in that piece. And maybe we all want them to go even slower, but it naturally comes out of the environment usually, and we document the environment. So I will show you how we do that. There is another code referred to by the statutes and the code that says a city can pass laws, and those laws have to conform to the traffic manual. And we saw earlier that a city can change speed limits, but everything keeps saying that we have to do it with an engineering study. If the laws were written that said you didn't have to have an engineering study, I could work on road projects and other things at the same time. We're pretty busy with speed studies. I've studied all the arterials, the 5-lane roads in Anchorage, and I've got a table of how they're doing. And some of the high crash areas really worry us. If it was all up to a vote, it would just delete all of your laws, would delete the engineering study part. We fit this in on overhead time between projects. So I'll take you past the laws real quick, and I've only got a few pages left, and I'll show you that the DOT has a policy document here that does say, do our studies, figure out how close people are to 85% or less. As I showed you in the statute, that's not our final answer. That's not even our first answer. But here is one of our limitations in our state policy to my department working on this, all the engineers that work on it. We can lower the speed limit, but not below the middle of that pack, the middle of that group, the median of the pace. And let's look again at what that looks like. So we're, with context, with those high density areas with lots of driveways, lots of crashes, we can take a look at a number that's right in the middle here. And that means half of your driving motorists are going to be illegal. They all get tickets. If you write that many tickets, and we've seen it with school zones, people ask to throw out the law. So, but it is one of the criteria that we lean towards when the context and the environment gets really conflicting, high use, crashes. We're looking to lower the number down towards the middle here, and some of our roads have that. And otherwise, if you're out on the open highway, people expect that number to be up here towards the right-hand side, but not in that red circle zone. So I guess what I'm trying to tell you is the engineers at DOT, we are limited to the middle of that pack. And we find that more important than the 85th. I think we lead the country in that. As people are commenting on the MUTCD, they're just now drafting language to adopt all these things you see in our policy as the context, the neighborhood, the adjacent development, houses and parks. We do that all before we look at the 85th. And then there is a rule here that says we can reduce it if the road physically has such a winding road, like in Cooper Landing, almost every curve there is a 35-mile-an-hour curve, and in between people go faster. But when the road geometry just can't bear anymore, that's another criteria. Most of Anchorage's roads are straight, so that's a hard one to apply. Just really quick, we're only a couple more. Is the MUTCD is the big national update that's underway, and the concern is that this manual might lean on the 85th, and it can say what it wants, but our state law and our state policy goes for road context before the 85th. But I did want you to know that the MUTCD itself is not a design-only document. It's not the final word on speed limits. It's a manual for signs and stripes and traffic signals. It doesn't make drivers behave. It's not going to make speed limits work with signs alone. The main language and the purpose of this manual is do things that work. We are supposed to help make roads safer and work better, but in order for that to work, the public has to buy into that number that we post. And so this is the general language in the beginning of that manual. They got to respect it. They got to believe they're going to get ticketed. Driving the Glen Highway this Labor Day weekend, there was a police officer between every single interchange. And I swear people on the Glen Highway were much better behaved than I've seen on a normal weekday commute when it wasn't September. And it says you got to back up these signs with laws. So the one more page of the MEPCD, the actual speed limit page that guides this. It does say, and I've highlighted for you in the middle, when a speed limit is posted, they say it should, not shall, be close to the 85th percentile. That's under a lot of national debate, and I'm pretty sure it's going to change to, I see a lot of movement afoot to look at what you see further down is the roadside development, the activity, the pace is what we use. That's that 10 mile an hour band of most people in the middle, most average courteous drivers, and then crash history will help us lower it. So I think this language will be changing. We're already ahead of that with our state law, and so when I just want you to know, and I'll show you the last 2 pages is the form we do fill out. I'll tell you that 85th percentile isn't even on page 1. Page 1 is what road are we working on? What kind of roadside safety is it if you run off the road? Is there is it a very close in development, or is it a very flat open road on flat terrain? We have pictures and criteria for that. That road geometry, if it just won't bear it, then that's it. And then we get into the statute is what governs us in priority, not 85th percentile. And it starts with neighborhoods. And we fill out these boxes here and we just say, are we seeing non-motorized use facilities, activity? Do we have lots of crossings? Do we have schools and parks? Is this a lot of close-in development like Moose Pass? Right when you get in the middle of it, the buildings are right next to the road, or downtown Anchorage are right next to the road, and those are not going to be 55-mile-an-hour roads. So context, as you mentioned, and then we look at not just are there driveways, like Muldoon Road is tons of driveways. Is there so many turns when you're driving down the road, 3 people are turning out in front of you at the same time? That's a big deal. And that helps us rate we rate these things as high, medium, or low problems. There's not a perfect math to this. Nobody nationally has a math program for this. But if we see these things, they're high conflict, that's a problem. We'll start lowering the speed. On the second page, we do get our speed data, and in the middle, there's a 1 column for 85th percentile. But we look at the shape of that bell curve. If something's wrong, tons of people are going fast because they're really angry, and tons of people are going really slow because they're angry too, and they're tired of the fast people, or they're doing something else. They're stopping every block. We've had places on the Kenai Peninsula where they get on the road and then get off again because there's no other way to get there, and so that creates conflict. That's a problem. That's not a good bell curve, and so we have to figure out how to fix that. Sometimes speed limit, but sometimes alternate routes. We do look at the crash history. These things are, as I walk through them, there's an Alaska statute on the left. We're following them in order with the statute. Number 1, neighborhoods; 2, schools and parks; 3, driveways. Then we get to the speed data, and we've added in the crash history. That's our own factor. It's not in the statute, but that's causing us to tilt some speeds. We're downward. We're in discussions with the city, and we haven't finished yet talking about high pedestrian and bike crash areas in the non-motorized plan. We want to discuss how the speed limit works in some of those areas, and if we can even make them work. And I'll end with after the crash history, almost nothing works if there's 0 police. If there's 0 public support on the radio and the media about we're all in this together, and with safety corridors outside of town and the Glen Highway recently on Labor Day, when law enforcement is on it and people start to believe there's more than one officer, or they talk about it and they think we all don't want to be the next person, that's someone we might know. We've seen almost a 50% drop in serious crashes on the rural highways in the double fines areas if all hands are on deck, including police and media, without building a new road. So I want you to know that it doesn't necessarily take engineering solutions. It takes kind of community solutions, and then speed limits can work. And I'm happy to put in a speed limit if everybody's going to support it with not only engineering, but media and policing. And that's all the slides. We can take questions on speed process. I wanted to show you this because it's under discussion as a solution to high-ped crash areas, and I have some pictures of that also, but this is the process. I'm going to go back to the first slide. Does anyone want to fire off some questions on process and 85th?
Any BPAC members out there with questions? Not hearing any. So I do have a question, Scott. This is Carol, about, so is this how the Muni is filling out that form that you showed us and submitting it to the state for all of the roads, or does Muni have an internal process to do the roads that they own? And that's partly, I'm always a little confused about who owns what and who's making the final decisions. So
Okay.
maybe that's more the question.
Okay. Yeah, I should have got a map of the speed zones here. This procedure is for the state and the city, the order of things, and the vehicle data is number 4, not number 1. But the form that I fill out is purely DOT's. It's not a mandatory form, and I recommend it to the Fairbanks DOT, Juneau, as a way to follow the statute and try to see where the numbers, they're kind of numbers, these boxes, where they take us, the inventory takes us. And also, to be fair, you would think every road has this. You mentioned city roads. This is only a new form in the last 7 years or 5 years as we try to follow the statute. There's a federal piece of software, federal highway program out there that walks people through some of these things, not nearly as much as our state law. Ours is actually better defined. They're heading this way, I can tell, nationally with this program called US Limits, but they're not quite there. And they do go primarily with the federal program on the vehicle speeds, and then plus or minus 5 miles an hour, kind of like you read in the MUTCD. We don't lock in on this federal program, but we do check with it to see what it tells us. There's a spot in the end of our form where we say, what does US Limits say? But yeah, I want to have further discussions with the city about Tudor Road and as a high-ped crash area, Muldoon Road. On our top ranking high crash roadways, half of them are low speed roads. They're already 30 mile an hour or 35. So putting up the sign isn't enough to do it. It's half of my top 10 roads are 45 mile an hour and half of them are 35 or 30. So I'm not going to say that setting the speed limit alone does it. It's that whole context of what we could build something different. And I did mention the rural roads. We didn't even build anything. We changed behavior with policing and media and double fines and just drawing more attention.
Mm-hmm. But
So
I guess my question is, like, at Golden View Drive, is that a Muni or DOT, and who decides the speed limit?
Golden View. Oh, go ahead, Sean.
Yeah, I put in the chat a map resource that can be used to determine who owns and maintains a road. So in that link, you can go in and you toggle management responsibility and
I find that in the legend.
Help you content.
Oh, content. Thank you. Yeah, and Golden View is a city road, and we'll go there. And Rabbit Creek is a state road. There we go. And we'll get that turned on. We'll zoom in there. It is hard, I understand, because a lot of our roads look alike. Lake Otis Parkway is primarily a municipal road. Tudor Road is a state road. Old Seward has a bit of both of us. North of Dowling is a city road, and south of Dowling is a state. So let's see, we're seeing state is
so
this
for
pinkish.
Context here, the pink here is going to be state and the purple is city. Green is privately managed or parks.
Okay. And as Joni will get to in the non-motorized plan, we agree we have a high injury network and lots of serious crashes on arterials with non-motorized users, bicyclists primarily getting hit at side street entrances with right turners, and pedestrians, the worst case is crossing the arterial. And speed is one factor, or one of our strongest factors is darkness. And we have over a lot of commitment to try to fix that we can get into in the non-motorized plan. A lot of projects, and we want to help Joni out with more projects to address non-motorized factors. So the speed question on state roads, they're generally 45, and we're under discussions, as Carol mentioned, with about who owns the roads. Is we want to talk with the city traffic section and police department about the crash data we're seeing and all the context on the arterials, and some of them we think are leaning towards that density, that conflict where we may want to nudge them down. Muldoon Road has a piece that's 40 mile an hour, and then other pieces that are 45, and Tudor's 45 and not 40 in places. Motorists will get confused if we change them every half mile, so we'll have to come up with a pretty clear set of speeds. Another question?
Yeah, Emily raised her hand in the Teams. Emily, do you have a question?
Yeah, thanks, Sean, and thanks, Scott, for this presentation. That was really helpful. I was wondering if you could help clarify a little bit how design speed plays into this. I realize that simply changing the posted speed limit isn't always effective, but are these the same sorts of criteria that are considered for setting the design speed?
They're considered, yes. That's been something that takes context too. The old history was that design speed was the posted speed plus 5. It was always up, always plus. And I can tell you that's not always happening. When we get into upgrades in Anchorage with arterials, we have had a lot of discussions working with our chiefs and project managers. We've said, why does it have to be plus? If we're downtown, we're trying to progress the signals at 30. We don't want plus, we want 30 or less. I think they're progressed at 28 by the city runs the signal timing for us. And so we don't always use plus the speed limit. We use the speed limit. There is a state standard that says when you're rehabilitating a road, you should use the 85th percentile. And I can tell you when we're working on those designs, we take a look at this kind of data and say, yeah, but we're seeing this context conflict. We can stick to the speed limit and not go plus. So it's not automatically, design speed is kind of different in a rural area versus in the city, in a neighborhood versus an arterial. It's in a neighborhood, it's most roads are default 25, and we're not going to try to design faster. The one thing we do look at is visibility, is how two parties can avoid each other and make their best basic judgment. So we try not to compromise on visibility or sight distance. If people are going fast and we can't seem to police them down or get them to behave, we take a look at the 85th or the majority, and we might make sure they have visibility, but that doesn't mean we're going to straighten the road out.
Did that answer your question, Emily?
Yeah, thanks.
Are there any more questions, comments?
I'm sorry, I'm maybe a little dense still, so I'm going to ask this very specifically. If Golden View Road is owned by the municipality, who makes the determination on the speed limit?
That would be the municipality.
Okay. And are they governed by all these same rules that you mentioned, or is there another layer for them?
They're governed by the same, I'll say. They're when I showed these laws earlier, and I've emailed them to Joni so that you're welcome to share them. I highlighted what I thought might be relevant, but you don't have to agree with the highlighting. But there was a when I traced out these laws, there's the basic law, default speed limits, and then there's, see if I can do this a little faster. And then there's alteration. It does refer in that law that's alteration by the state and the municipalities. It says that in our respective road jurisdictions, who owns what, we can change it from the default 55, 25 if we do an engineering study. And then so the city should follow the same criteria that we look at, but how they package it is up to them. The reason I make this table is to help everybody see what went into that packaging. How do you consider neighborhoods? We have no criteria in the statute, so we look at our houses fronting the street with their driveways, and or is it the type of road that's where the kids are playing in? And the DOT doesn't have a lot of those roads, but the city does. We do have a few roads that are neighborhood roads. And that makes a big difference about levels of conflict and judgment.
Scott, are you trying to share a table? We're seeing the map right now.
Oh, yeah, let me click the right thing again. That's why I walked through those laws and I wasn't even sharing.
Yeah. And it looks like Lindsay has her hand up right now.
Go ahead, Lindsay. Yeah, here's this. The rules are the same, and here's the city is under their city and the state can alter from the default laws, and we all consider the same things. Okay, Lindsay.
Thanks. And can you just zoom in on the PDFs you're showing?
Yeah.
But yeah, so my question, I'm really just trying to think about this in the context of the community I'm most used to, which is Spenard, Midtown. And we do have some projects that are going under design right now. And so I guess the questions will to follow up will be if engineering studies are being done on those projects. But I'm specifically thinking about Spenard Road from Minnesota to Benson. They're doing a redesign right now. And really when I think about where pedestrians or bicyclist collisions happen, it is along this section of Spenard Road and the Minnesota intersection area. And Minnesota is also another road that our neighborhood has thought and tried to think of ways to slow it down north of Tudor when it becomes kind of the 6 to 8 lanes dividing our community. There's a lot of crossing that happens not at lights. There are a lot of collisions that happen along it, and people die on Minnesota. And we're always confronted with the challenge of the speed limit. We know you can't just change the speed limit sign and it's going to change driver behavior. If things aren't designed for that, yeah, there you go. And so in trying to put this information into context of just how we can apply this into planning projects or advocating for safer roadways in our community, I'm just trying to get a sense of how you think this can be used. You know, Spenard redesign is a specific project that's happening right now, but I don't think there's opportunity to look at the speed limit. And I don't know when there has ever been the opportunity to look at a speed limit for any of these road projects I've been involved in for the last decade. So can you just clarify, when do these engineering studies happen? What triggers it? And where are there opportunities to revisit this for projects?
Okay, that's really a good question because let's see, the stuff if I get back to sharing screen one. The MUTCD, which besides mentioning 85th, it actually says that when a road changes context, you should reconsider it. And I would think that a design like Spenard Road may not be able to measure what's there today and say, well, that's what it's going to be. It may be based on the change in geometry. It's not going to be 4 lanes. So the MUTCD does say somewhere's in here, I found it, and I probably won't find it this time. It says, should conduct engineering studies. I'll try to zoom in, I'm sorry. And you can control zoom on my screen and make it zoom if you want to scroll around. I found out you don't have to be stuck with my screen. States and cities should conduct engineering studies to reevaluate anything other than the de facto limits that have on roads that have undergone significant changes. So maybe right after it's built, and they can have a wait and see and then take measurements after it's built, or they can try to predict it based on geometry. But we often say when a road is drastically changing, like going urban curb and gutter, then the old speed limit is void. We'll come up with a new one. And I use that form to try to predict what that'll be, but I won't have speed studies. In a place in the Mat-Su, we're actually using a road we're looking for a road just like the one we did and taking measurements at a road that looks just like it and then using that as kind of a marker. I do appreciate Minnesota Drive and Spenard. I think Spenard's changing the context with the design. Minnesota is straight, so how do you calm it? And I do want you to know that when we previously briefed AMATs, we talked about, and I won't go over all these, but we talked about how hard it is to calm an arterial that's straight. Do you take away lanes? Do you add in a crossing? It's very hard, but we put everything, we said anything's on the table, and we came up with 10 ideas for Tudor, but it could just as well be Minnesota Drive. And all I can tell you at this time, besides these 10 options, which I'll save for save time for Joni and non-motorized plan, is this could apply anywhere on the arterials in the non-motorized plan. In the design of Minnesota Drive Rehab, we intentionally did not expand our turn lanes for motorist storage, especially midway between the signals at somewhere in the 33rd area. Right in this area, I'm sorry, wrong screen again. We intentionally did not just make everything about motorists because we're waiting. There was going to be DHS has been working towards hoping to get some pedestrian study in that area to help us with information we don't have. And I know that's been tough to do because of recent events, COVID and stuff, but we're not making more pavement for vehicle storage. We're waiting to see where we might preserve median for pedestrian crossing. So we don't know yet, but it's not an easy road to retrofit to something else. I do want to say one thing just for how crazy this is we said this at AMATs in this option thing is it's a wide road. And one reason we have really wide arterials, and I'm just going to tell you, is that the Seward Highway and the Glen Highway aren't connected, and all of our arterials are taking that overflow. Because there's a lack of a freeway connection, all of our serious crashes are happening between these freeways at signals in between. The highest concentration of serious and fatal crashes in Alaska is between these two freeways, and traffic volume and wide arterials. And briefly at AMATs, what we did talk about was if we had a freeway connection, we've already seen this with MLK and Elmore, tens of thousands of cars will go from some of these arterial roads to the freeway connection, which kind of opens the door to talk about whether we need all the lanes or all the width on some of these roads, or more crossings are possible. So to me, the whole slate in AMATs becomes a lot easier in Northeast Anchorage or North Anchorage if there's a hierarchy of roads. We can actually rethink the arterials. And I just want to leave you with that thought. And back to you, Sean, are there other questions?
It looked like Eric had his hand up.
Eric had a hand up, but
Thanks, you guys. Part of my question was being answered. I was curious about exemptions, or I wanted more discussion on pedestrians, particularly persons that utilize wheelchairs. I think of the 4 tenets of the law that you showed, I was trying to create a challenge to see if all of those things would be met. And I just didn't know how that worked. So I didn't want to ask a question like, is there a certain demographic that can create an exemption request or policy, but wanted to know what your experience was when you're thinking of pedestrians that utilize wheelchairs and their ability to access the community.
I know one site in particular that really it's probably an easier example for me because it was so clear. The Glen Highway in Burgaw, I had some slides for AMATs and I have them here handy. I could send it later, but it used to be a pedestrian bridge with stairs. and then no allowed crossing of 6-lane freeway plus turn lanes at a traffic signal, and it wasn't working for everybody. You know, there were more. I told the AMAT's technical committee last December that had 5 pedestrian deaths. Some were pretty terrible because people crossed the work zone when it was fenced off, and there were problems in behaviors. But there was a person there in a wheelchair who got help being pushed across because there was really no alternative. And I want to say the best thing that happened was that interchange with a smooth crossing over the top of the freeway. And I have a map for the AMAT's non-motorized plan solutions page. We can cross at signals a lot, and sometimes they're wide, but we do have options of making those crossings shorter and faster, not waiting so long. And we can get into that when we get into the non-motorized plan if you get into questions. And then we also have over 70 structures in this city that was a kind of a community commitment, and it's mostly for green belts. But if we want to build things, we can. It just takes a lot of money and choosing where they will be. If we were willing to buy 70 bridges around the city, I can tell you they're not on the arterials, most of them. They're for schools and parks. But yeah, there isn't something that's an automatic in the form I fill out that says that's demographic based, but it is about kids and parks and increased activity of crossing. People need time to cross and gaps to cross. And if they don't have it, like on Dowling at the roundabouts, my supervisors, we've looked at that and said we've got to go to the next best practice and come up with crossing electronic devices to get across the multi-lane approaches. So we're using the rapid beacons that are the current state of the art, and we'll keep learning with the rest of the country on that.
Thanks.
And Joni, I'm intentionally trying not to use up all your time on solutions for today's meeting topics agenda, Carol and Joni, but we can get into solutions that maybe aren't even in the plan yet because they just takes time to budget for them. And what we have talked about is, can we bring extra money to the plan?
Yeah, thanks, Scott. Sorry, it's Joni real quick. Thank you, Scott. Yes, we can get into that a little bit when we talk about the non-motorized plan. I will give everyone just a brief update of what we talked about with our meeting with Kim last week. And then, but just for time, I think we should probably move on to Aaron's presentation on the MTP 101. And then after that, we should have a few minutes after the tip update to have some non-motorized questions. But thank you so much for all the details, Scott. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Good questions. They're very hard to do.
Okay, sorry, I've got the agenda here in front of me. So Carol, the next thing on the list is the MTP 101 presentation that Aaron is going to give.
Okie dokie. Hello, everyone. Can you see my screen, the presentation?
Yes,
Yes.
MTP
Yep.
101.
Yes, good. Thank you very much. Okay, my name is Aaron Jongenalen. I'm a senior transportation planner with AMATS, and I am the project manager for the MTP and the MTP updates that are coming. So I'm here to give you a quick MTP 101. So what is the MTP, how it factors into what we do, and what are some of the requirements of it. Just a heads up, in the TAC and policy committee meetings when I gave this, and the CAC and the FAC, they were about 30 minutes in length. So I apologize that this will be kind of a long presentation, relatively speaking, but there's a lot that goes into it. So I will try my best to hurry through it as quickly as possible, keeping in mind of your guys' time constraint. So really quickly, the presentation today is a little different than normal. Instead of using PowerPoint, we're actually using ArcGIS story maps. So the format's a little bit different than maybe what we've done in the past. The idea for this presentation is it's live on our website right now under the MTP webpage. And it's to keep it there as a live link for people to go to on a regular basis, just if they want to know more information about the MTP. Right now, it's just the presentation itself, but this Thursday, I am going to do a recording of what I'm going to give to you guys tonight, and we're going to have that attached to this presentation. So I'll be basically narrating the presentation, and people can follow along. And hopefully the idea is to give people more context than what they would get from just a regular static presentation. So it's a nice feature, because when you have this bar here that I'm pointing to, you can click on each one and it kind of auto shoots you to the section that we're going to be talking about. So you'll see me clicking this bar through the presentation itself. So just a heads up on there. Okay, so what is the MTP? First, to know about the MTP, what area it covers. It covers the AMATS area, which is the majority of the municipality of Anchorage, but not all of it. So it stops in the northern portion at the Connect River Bridge up here, and then in the southern portion, it stops at the Potter Marsh Way Station. So it doesn't include Bird, Gird, Indian. And you know, if we want to know more about why our boundary is what it is, we can talk about that at some other time. But we do include Chugach, Eagle River, Peters Creek, Eklutna, Anchorage Bowl, Hillside, all that kind of stuff. So it covers a very large area. So what is the MTP? The MTP is a 20-year transportation plan. So we basically look at our transportation network and we identify through the process areas of needs, you know, road improvements, non-motorized improvements, transit improvements, etc. And we say, okay, what can we accomplish in the next 20 years based on those needs? It's a lengthy process that we have to do every 4 years. So this graphic here, I just want to kind of walk through it real quick. So this is kind of a brief timeline of what to expect with an MTP update. Just so you know, this does not include everything possible, but these are just kind of the big highlighted area, big points that we're going to talk about in this presentation today. So at the start of this 3 to 4 year period, we do criteria and goals, objectives, goals, objectives, performance measures, and targets. Then we lead into the criteria that we use to help pick projects. Then we do data analysis. Then we do project development and fiscal constraint. Then we have policies. Then we do, one of the required items we have is an air quality conformity determination. And then we have Mpo approval and we have FHWA approval. I'll get into more of these here later. This is just to give you an idea of what we go through. It's a lot that we have to do on a regular basis. So the first thing that we generally do when we start an MTP update is we start with the vision. The goals, which are what do we want to achieve? The objectives are how do we want to achieve it? Performance measures is how are we measuring our success? And then performance targets are how will we know if we succeed? Goals and objectives tend to be pretty broad, overarching statements. Don't really have a way to zoom in anymore. I apologize for that. But so for an example, we have a goal of improved travel conditions, where our goal is to develop an efficient multimodal transportation system to reduce congestion, promote accessibility, and improve system reliability. So as you can see, it's a pretty overarching, covering a lot of different options. And then we have the objectives, which are much more specific and measurable. So as an example here, we are talking about system reliability for all modes. So it's a piece of that goal that we're using for this objective. These goals and objectives help kind of steer the direction of the MTP or other AMATS projects to make sure we're all kind of heading down the same direction that, you know, we've all agreed upon. A couple things to note about the goals and objectives. We have kind of a bare minimum as AMATS that we have to follow or we have to account for as part of our MTP. There are national planning factors and national goals. There are 10 planning factors and 7 goals. Some of them overlap, like for example, safety is on both lists. We have to account for those. So you can count that as kind of like a bare minimum that we have to meet, and then we can add goals and objectives on top of there. So when you look through the MTP, you'll kind of see this, oh, this is the same stuff from year to year for a lot of these things. There's a reason for that because that's part of our requirement in federal regulation that we have to follow it. And so some of it doesn't change very often, unfortunately. Just note that any goal and objective that we add on top of the federally required ones, we are responsible for it as an MPO. So it's not just something that we can just add in and willy-nilly ignore if we want. We need to make sure that we're accounting for it in all of our plans that we're doing. Okay, next we have performance measures and targets. So honestly, performance measures and targets have been part of the planning process for quite a long time. It's only recently through the MAP 21, the authorization bill for MAP 21 and the FAST Act, where performance measures and targets really came to the forefront as a way to help ensure that we are investing the federal transportation funding that we get in the right areas. So the authorization bills came and they set specific measures and targets that we as an MPO are required to deal with. So there's two options. We can set our own targets, or we can support the state or transit providers with their targets. Right now, AMATS is supporting the state and transit with their targets. Big reason for that is the state owns most of the facilities that the measures cover, because they cover the interstate and non-interstate NHS for the majority of the targets, except for safety, which covers all public roads. And AMATS doesn't really have its own data to be able to set the targets specifically. So for example, safety is provided by the state, which is on a statewide basis, and it's hard for them to aggregate down everything to our specific area. So we as AMATS are looking at doing our own safety plan to try and gather that data and see if we want to set our own targets in the future. And a lot of the other ones, we're probably going to continue to support the state's targets unless something changes in the future. Again, please note, we can add performance measures and targets above and beyond what is federally required, but we are responsible for them. So if we don't meet the targets, we actually are held accountable for them. We don't have the same level of accountability as the state, where our funding is directly impacted. Right now, that's not an option, but it could be in the future if this becomes an issue. And just note that targets are a way to, how are we succeeding? So a couple things about targets. You want a data-driven percentage or number followed by a year. So you want to be able to say, by X date, we hope to achieve X target. If you don't have those, then targets become not very useful for the overall process. That's a quick explanation of goals, objectives, performance measures, and targets. Does anyone have any questions at this point? Okay. Anyone in the room? Okay. So what happens after you develop your goals, measures, and targets? So you've set your direction of where you're going with the plan. The next thing that you want to work on is criteria. And what is criteria? Criteria is our way to help analyze projects that are nominated for this plan to be included in this plan, to see if it's helping us meet our performance measures, our targets, our goals, and objectives. So we take all the work we did in the first step and we use it to help craft these criteria. So we take these criteria, we take the projects that are nominated or selected from plans, and we say, okay, how do they score and rank? And typically the highest scoring one means they're helping us meet our goals and objectives the best. So for example, we have criteria from the 2040 MTP. So as you can see, we have our different criterion over here. This is just a few examples. This is not a complete list of all the criteria we used for the 2040 MTP. So we had things like timing of need. Is it something that can wait until beyond 2040? So if it's something that could wait to be beyond 2040, that wasn't an immediate need, maybe it wasn't the highest priority. These criteria are developed as part of the process. They are put out for public comment and review. So we highly encourage people, participate when they're out and provide feedback. As we'll talk about later, I don't want to steal too much of Joni or Craig's thunder. The TIP criteria, that's AMATS's Transportation Improvement Program. It's kind of a smaller version of the MTP. It's our funding program. It says over the next 4 years, here are the projects we're going to put funding towards. It uses a set of criteria as well. What we try and do is make sure that the MTP and TIP criteria are harmonized between the two so that we're making sure we're heading in the correct direction. Please note that the MTP criteria is much more overarching and broad because the MTP itself is more overarching and broad in its scope, where the TIP tends to be much more focused and targeted. Any questions on criteria? Okay. Data analysis. This is a big one. So data analysis, first thing of this, what we do with data analysis is we do a status of the system. So the status of the system is basically taking a look at the existing transportation system and trying to assess where are we at. Generally with how many miles of road, non-motorized facilities, transit facilities, rail facilities, that kind of stuff. We want to get a good baseline. So similar to performance measures where you want to develop a baseline so then you can see where you're at in the future. We are setting our baseline by using the status of the system. So this is using our model, which uses our demographic data, so population and household employment information, and we set our baseline. Then when we have our baseline, we move to the deficiencies analysis. I do apologize for this deficiencies analysis graphic. It is hard to read on some screens, but it is the only one I had available. The deficiency analysis takes a look at our status of the system, so our baseline, projects out to our horizon year, so 20 years out, and says, what does our transportation system look like if we didn't make any improvements on anything? And as you can see from this map here, there are certain areas of concern. So Tudor Road, MLK, Northern Lights, the Glen Highway, you know, some of the ones we've kind of known about for a while. And this is a tool, one of the tools we use to help identify needs, which help us to identify projects to put into the plan. And I'll get into projects here more in a minute. Are there any questions about the status of the system or the deficiency analysis? So please note that when we do any data analysis, we do have a model that we use, a transportation model. You know, maybe some of you have heard over the years some concerns about data usage and, you know, the newness of the data. How new is it when we use it? One of our requirements is to use the latest available data. And people always get confused as to what that means because they look at the plan in, say we have our next plan, our 2050 update. We start work on it now in 2021, and by 2023, when we have most of the project anticipated to be completed into a plan, people start looking at it. And they say, you're using data here from 2019 or 2020. You need to be using the 2022 data. And what they need to realize is latest available means when we started our update of the plan or when we started our update of the model. So it will be that we could have some older data in the MTP. And that's just kind of a limitation of how long it takes to update the MTP. You know, at some point we just have to take our snapshot of the data and we have to move on so we can get the MTP done. We don't have the luxury of taking 10 years to get an MTP done. Yes, Scott.
I just thought that the map you're showing us looks a lot like the high crash network in the non-motorized plan. It has some resemblance.
Yeah, it's very astute of you. Yes, thank you. And so, you know, Scott brings up a question that I'll get to now. Sorry, any other questions before we move on? Okay. So kind of segueing into what Scott's talking about is project selection. So we talked about the data analysis that we did there, but that's not the only place that we get projects from. There's a lot of different sources that we get projects from. It's from our data analysis using the model. It's also from the STIP. That's the statewide TIP. So that's their funding program. We also do the AMATS TIP. We do the DOT 10-year plan. So that's their kind of long year plan. Then we do the Munis Capital Improvement Program. So that's the Munis funding program. Then we also do other plans, and I specifically say updated and new. So this catches people a lot. When we look at other plans that are out there, for example, the Spenard Corridor Plan, we look at was it new or updated since the last MTP update. So for example, the 2040 update was done recently, and at that time, the Spenard Corridor Plan was not approved. So for this new update, we will be looking at the Spenard Corridor Plan to draw from for goals and objectives, for projects, for anything that can help feed into the MTP. We try and limit our plan look at. So we don't go back to the 1970s to look at transportation plans to see if there's projects or goals and objectives to put into our current plan, because it's a little outdated at that point. So in keeping with this idea of making sure that we are using the latest available data, we limit what plans we look at. Please also note that previous MTPs have looked at other plans that are already established. So if it's a plan from 2010, it will look back in the 2035 MTP and then probably reconfirmed in the 2040 MTP. And the idea is not to go back and reconfirm it as part of the 2050, but to move on and say it's already been accounted for, let's move on. Now, if there's been some update to that plan, even if it's a small update, we will go back and look at it. And then we have project nominations. So we will have a project nomination period similar to our TIP where we open up project nominations, send out a form, send out a notice, let people know about it, and they can nominate any project and it will be reviewed and scored where possible. Any questions about projects? Okay. So the next thing we have is fiscal analysis. So fiscal analysis is the second most important thing in the MTP. I'll get to the first most important thing here in a little bit. The fiscal analysis is us taking a look at historical and current trends for funding and developing a financial plan that says, can we afford the projects that we are looking at funding? So you have your list of projects, you have your funding, and you're trying to make sure they balance. It is a requirement for us to make sure that you are not exceeding the amount of funding that you have available. So that's why when we're developing the MTP, you'll see us say, okay, we can't afford that project, so we'll have to do these smaller projects instead. Or if we take out this project, it'll free up a little bit of funding and we can move some more projects in. We have to make sure we keep that balance going. It is a requirement. There's a lot of different sources of funding that we look at. They're primarily federal and non-federal. It's generally the options out there. So federal would be like DOT's STIP funding that they show, or AMAT's TIP funding, or grants that we can receive. And then non-federal would be the Muni's bond funding or the state general obligation funds. We do have to account for public transportation department dollars and railroad dollars. And then we have other, and this can be any kind of grant or some other kind of program. When we look at the funding assumptions, we have to be very careful. There are a couple of requirements that we have. One, we have to make sure that any non-historically backed funding assumption is based in actual current movement. So for example, say the DOT or the state wanted to have a transportation fund, and we wanted to account for that and say, okay, X number of million per year for the life of the program. There'd have to be some kind of forward momentum somewhere. So either through the legislature or the governor or something would have to be moving forward. It can't be us just sitting in a room saying, yeah, I think this is a good funding source to make up and this is a good one. They have to be realistic in their approach. We tend to be pretty conservative in our approach for funding because if we are too pie in the sky with it, it leads to unrealistic expectations of what we can afford in the future. So this is my favorite part of the plan. I love doing this part of it. So when we get to this for the next update, you'll see me very giddy and happy about having to do it. I'm kind of insane like that. I apologize. Another thing that we have to account for is year of expenditure dollars. This is a very weird requirement, but we do have a program that we set up. It's an Excel that I built years ago that kind of helps inflate these dollars to the expected year of expenditure. So we do account for things like the consumer price index, the construction inflation indexes that are out there. So it helps to kind of ground truth or, okay, in these year of dollars, it's cheaper than it would be in the future. So we want to make sure that we're actually realistic in what it'll cost 10 years down the line for a project or how much funding we have available. Any question on funding? Okay. Another portion of the MTP that we do is developing policies and actions. So policies and actions are a way for us to focus on helping make improvements to the transportation system if it's not project specific. So the majority of the MTP is made up with, construction or plan projects. But there's a portion, the implementation section, where we're like, okay, there's some things we can do to help make improvements to the transportation system that are not as tangible. They're harder to put into a project term for people to understand. And that's where we get into policies or actions. So please note that any policies or actions that we have in the MTP are AMAT specific. We can work with our planning partners, DOT or the Muni or anyone else, and help them develop something as well. But when we say do this, we're talking about AMATs doing this. AMATs does not have the authority to require DOT or the municipality of Anchorage to do something. So for example, speed changes on the roads. We can't sit there and say, you must change this speed, but we can say work with DOT or the municipality to help fund speed studies is a good example since we talked about that today. Other things in action might be investigating congestion management alternatives to roadway expansion projects. This is a pretty common one that we do on a regular basis because we have a program already set up for this. So we try where we can. But I just wanted to give you an example of what we're talking about here, these intangible kind of things. Anyone have any questions on policies and actions? Okay. Next. Okay, so I mentioned that the fiscal analysis was the second most important. The first most important thing of an MTP is the air quality conformity determination. The reason is the air quality conformity determination is what is approved by FHWA and FTA at the end of the MTP update. And in order to have an air quality conformity determination, you have to have a fiscal analysis. Because you basically have to say, here are the projects we can anticipate funding, and then you do your air quality analysis on those projects. So what is the air quality conformity determination? It requires that we show that the projects in our MTP will not worsen air quality within our boundary for the 3 criteria pollutants that we list here. So CO, motor vehicle emissions, PM 2.5 wood smoke, which we don't have a lot of problems with down here, but in Fairbanks, as most people know, it's a significant concern up there. And then PM 10, which is dust. We do have a big concern here for dust because of the roadway. You know, when you put gravel down to help with ice, that gets ground up into a powder form that can get into the air and it becomes a health concern. We do have programs in place to help mitigate that, but we always have to make sure we're aware of what's going on and not overstepping our bounds on there and going into an exceedance. So because we are a maintenance area with a limited maintenance plan, we are required to update our MTP, our air quality conformity determination every 4 years. So anywhere outside of us has 5 years. So we have less time than most people do to update our MTP. The air quality conformity determination is very technical. It has a lot of requirements associated with it in terms of public comment periods and all that kind of stuff. It will be released for everyone to be able to see when we get to that point in the plan update. Any questions on the air quality conformity?
I guess one question is,
yes.
Do you factor in something for all the electric vehicles and hybrid vehicles that are now becoming more popular?
That is something we'll have to look at as part of there. For the PM10, it doesn't really do a whole lot for them because they're still utilizing the roadway and producing that dust. But for the CO, we do look at it, is my understanding, but we already are so under the threshold on CO that at this point it doesn't really change a whole lot, but it is something that we do look at as far as I know. Any other questions? Okay. Mpo approval. Okay, so after we've done all of that stuff I've just kind of rambled on about, we get to the last about a year or so of the plan left. And this is where we do our approval. So we've compiled everything into a document. We do an interagency review. So, you know, DOT, Muni, AMATs look at it to make sure that everything still looks good, that we've got our fiscal analysis done, that we've got the air quality done, everything like that. We also do a resource agency review. this is required of us, so we meet with DNR or Parks or Corps of Engineer, any group that has a resource, so wetlands or other parks or anything like that. We have to meet with them. We have to get their take on it. We have to show them what projects we're planning, what everything looks like, how our air quality is doing, and get their comments on the plan itself. We actually have a whole section in the plan that deals with the resource agency and air quality. After we've done all that, the document is ready for public review. So we put it out for public review for a certain amount of time. We get comments, we bring all those comments back, and we hope with our new process to make edits to the document where possible. At the same time, we also do a assembly public hearing period. This is required as in our operating agreement and the municipal code to give the Anchorage Assembly a review period, and they submit their comments to the AMAT's TAC and Policy Committee, and those comments are reviewed by those groups. So once everything's collected, we bring it to the Technical Advisory Committee for review and recommendation, and then we have Policy Committee review and approval, and that's the Mpo approval. When we have this public review period, that's when we also are having like this group, the BPAC, or the Community Advisory Committee, or the Freight, or any other community councils, or any other groups. We really strive for them to take a good look at the document in its entirety, in its entire context, from the goals and objectives all the way through, and say, okay, what changes would you like to see on this? Past MTPs, we've been pretty limited in our time in terms of making changes, but our hope this go round is to have a good lengthy review period and then to make substantial changes where possible. So I really encourage you, I'll try and keep everyone informed of how the process is going and major milestones or where we need involvement, but please be on the lookout for it as we go over the next 3 years. Any questions about MPO approval? Okay, and then once MPO's approval is done, we do FHWA FTA approval. So this is a small step at the very end where we get everything together. We send it to FHWA FTA and say, here's everything. Here, we're meeting all the requirements here, plus all the additional we added to it. Can you please review it and make sure we're in conformance? And if they give their blessing, we're done for 4 years. And then we'll start the next update, maybe 6 months to a year after we get approval. Please note there are a lot of public comment periods during this time frame. In almost everything I showed you today, there is going to be some kind of public comment period. So it is not going to be a get everything done behind the scenes and then drop it on you at the last minute. Any questions? Well, thank you for sticking with me. I hope I didn't bore you all to death. I think I kept within my 30-minute timeline, but I didn't time myself. So, and I do want to note that this presentation is available for other groups if they request or want me to come give the presentation, give them an explanation of the MTP. I'm available at any time. They can send an email to AMAT's info, or they can look me up on the website and send it to me as well. Like I said, this will be available on the AMAT's website for anyone to go through at their own leisure if they want. Yes.
Go ahead, Lindsay.
Yeah, I just have a quick question. I was waiting for you to say, and now we're working on the next MTP. And I'm like, we just put together comments before the pandemic, and it was all just approved. So is there a timeline for that, or just really kind of what is the focus on making these presentations about the MTP at this point?
Yes, you are correct. Our next MTP update is starting. It started like 2 weeks ago, basically, with a lot of the internal, getting the project management plan set up and getting our public involvement plan set up and ready to have the committees review it and stuff. So because we have to update this every 4 years, and it takes us about 3 to 4 years to update it, it's a never-ending update cycle. So we just had this updated a year ago in August. So we have until 2024 to update it again. And we're already about a year into it. So I'm trying to make sure that we keep ourselves moving forward as fast as possible. So expect by the end of this year to really start getting into development of the plan. My goal this go around is to have a shorter upfront development. So maybe not spend 6 months on the goals and objectives, maybe spend a much shorter time period, or the criteria development or selecting projects. Make that more streamlined, and then get the document out to everyone as fast as possible. Because what we've been discovering is that people will follow us on the very beginning and they'll do the individual comments on the pieces we put out. But then when it comes time to the full document years later, they've forgotten everything or they don't see the changes they want. And it becomes a huge pain for us as staff and for members of the public to be able to follow along. So we're going to try this new way of doing it. So if you see shorter periods of time to review things, don't worry. There'll be plenty of time to make changes when we actually get the full document out. I'm hoping, crossing fingers, sometime in 2023. And then that'll give us about a year to do public review, comments, and changes where needed. So getting back to your other question, the idea of this presentation is to try and give people a little bit of a baseline understanding of what the MTP is, how it relates to what we do, and why we're doing some of the things that we're doing. Because what we found in previous MTP updates is people new or people who have been involved in the process didn't really understand it as well. And so we wanted to give people a good grounding before we just dove headfirst into the next MTP update. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you. Sounds good.
Okay.
Great. Any other questions for Aaron? Not seeing any. Hey, Joni, I want to do an agenda and a time check because I feel like we're supposed to close up by 8:30. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. I think we're okay on time. The last 3 items shouldn't take super long at all. So
Okay, then take it away.
Okay, great. Thanks, Carol. So the next item is the item C, the TIP criteria update. And I know that Craig is gonna Craig is gonna do that, and then maybe with a little help from Aaron. But I am he's got it. Oh, he's got it up on his screen there. So Aaron's gonna share his screen.
Oh,
and,
okay.
Oh, sorry. Or I can do that too.
I'll share my screen for Craig.
And just go. And I did send you all the link to the where it is on the website. So I do think that the committee should take some time and make some comments on the TIP criteria and submit those. The submittal deadline is September 20th. So I know that we could all benefit from this committee just taking a quick look or a long look and giving some comments for the TIP criteria team. So that's it for me, and Aaron and Craig are going to talk about this.
I'll just be brief. So basically, if you're thinking of the MTP that Aaron just went over, that's the 20-year plan. It talks about all the sources of funding that we might be able to use for surface transportation improvements, whether they're federal or state or local. They're all wrapped in there, and it's kind of let's think about all the things we could do in the next 20 years. The TIP is that we have to show exactly how many dollars are in our allocation, $28,942,000, and we program it to the exact dollar. And that was just a number off the top of my head, but we program it to the exact dollar for the next 4 years. And so the TIP that's coming up is what is that? The 23, 4, 5, 6 one, 23, 2023 through 2026 one. And the criteria are what we use to rank and score the projects. And, we look at the projects that are in the MTP, we look at the projects that are in the non-motorized plan and different plans, and then we get nominations from different entities and folks around the city, and we use those to help figure out what we're going to fund using these criteria. The criteria in the past have always been very similar, and we look at them every 4 years to try and get them a little more objective. In this case, you'll see, if you've seen the criteria before, you'll see that it kind of looks a little different. For example, it says safety there, and it talks about this criteria is measuring if something improves truck-related safety issue. And then it's got a category for, let's say it's the road category, complete streets, major infrastructure, et cetera, and then bike and ped. And so we're able to rank all of these projects at the same time using these criteria, and some of them may get more points depending on what the criteria and what the project is focused on. But you can see just at the top there that the one on the left is relating to the roadway, and the one on the right is talking about conflicts between freight and non-motorized users. So kind of clearly delineating, we're talking about projects that relate to safety here that get more points if they're trying to separate those conflicts between freight and non-motorized users. So there's a lot of stuff to chew on here. I guess I would say that since the deadline is the 20th, there's not a whole lot of time, and the things that we went to before tonight took a lot of time, which is understandable because they're very important. I'm happy to do a work session with the committee if we just want to have an hour or so, or whatever you guys want, to go over just the criteria, so you can really chew on these and get a good sense of it. But because looks like we have about 27 minutes left, I'm happy to do whatever the committee would like.
Any committee member? I have a couple questions, but any committee members out there have a question? So I think your works, I've not seen anybody, but jump in, raise your hand or just jump in. A work session might be better than these last 27 minutes because there's a lot of words in here where I'm stumped. Medium total effectiveness of bicycle safety countermeasures. I don't know what that is, so I can't really make a comment about it. And there's some things about, you're getting points for new, but could you have new and approved? You get points if you're improving it as well. And I'm going to need more context to be able to give a comment about that, because there might be a reason that you chose the word new and I can't tell that. So I'm going to vote for a work session, and I would love to be there, but I do have one more question. If a project is put in this little bucket, do they end up getting scored on one column or both columns at the same time, or how do you figure out which column you're scoring them on?
Yeah, currently, it's a great question. Currently, our policy and procedures for AMATs say that we spend, X percentage on roadway type projects, a certain percentage on the ones that improve, that mitigate congestion or improve air quality, and 10 to 15% of our total allocation on non-motorized type projects, not including the specific transportation alternative program funds. So, we would score them together like this. And then when we go to fund them, we know we have 10 to 15% of our total allocation to fit towards these non-motorized type projects. And you'd score them at the same time, but the top ones in the non-motorized would go to be funded over there. Does that answer your question there?
That helps a bit. I might need more of an example.
So we do score them separate. So if you have a project comes in that's making an improvement to a roadway, but also includes non-motorized improvements, you would score it under the complete streets major infrastructure corridor project column. If it is just a non-motorized facility, say a pathway or sidewalk improvement without big roadway improvements or other roadway improvements, it would be just under the bicycle and pedestrian column.
Yeah, when we fund, when we pay for the roadway improvement, if it includes non-motorized, that doesn't count towards the 10 to 15% that we spend on non-motorized. That's part of a complete street. We build streets, we build them with non-motorized facilities, with rare exceptions. Obviously, the Seward and Glen, you're not going to, for the most part, put non-motorized facilities on there. That's just too high speed of a corridor. But we don't include the pathway that's next to Fireweed or Spinard or whatever as part of the non-motorized. That's in a complete street.
Yes, that helped. Thanks, Aaron.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe if people could find the little raise your hand thing, would you be interested, or the thumbs up on your screen, so I can see how many people would be interested in a little tip criteria work session with Craig? I see Lindsay, myself, Emily, Eric, Chelsea.
John's raising his hand.
Okay, John's over there. Thank you, Joni.
Looks like that's them all.
Yeah, so Craig, I think maybe that's the best approach for that. And maybe if you can do a doodle poll or something for us.
Yeah, absolutely. No, this is very important. It's one of the most important things we do, trying to tweak our criteria to be reflective of state of the art. That's what citizens of Anchorage want. So it's very important that we make sure this is clear to you. And it is kind of a radical departure from our previous version. So we'll get a doodle poll out and figure out when we can get you folks together. We can do it virtually. That makes it a bit easier. You don't have to try and get daycare or time off or whatever. We'll get it figured out.
And I just wanted to ask, it's similar to the non-motorized plan. We were, going to have a workshop, and I think we had it the day before comments were due. And I would have liked to create some BPAC comments on the tip criteria. So at this work session, could the comments that we provide at the session be incorporated as BPAC comments, or would it just make sense for them to be comments from individuals?
I think if you have everyone at the majority of the people at the meeting agree that that's the comment from the BPAC, it'd be from the BPAC. You wouldn't have to have them individually. I mean, if you came up with a suggestion and you only had one other person agreeing with you, that would be an individual comment, but yeah.
Mm-hmm. Great.
Great, yeah, I guess you don't have much time, Craig, given the number of days, so it's gonna have to be late this week or early next week, I think, if we wanna pull it together.
Yeah, we'll send out a poll tomorrow.
Thank you.
Just for reference, I did a presentation work session with the Community Advisory Committee on these comments, and it was about 2 hours long. It was a lot to go through because we went through each individual criterion and talked about the rationale behind it, tried to explain how we score based on it and everything like that. So just as a heads up.
Good to know. Thank you.
Was that meeting recorded?
I want to, of course you asked that. I don't actually, I think so. I'll have to look into it and see. And if so, we can let people know.
I'm trying to look right now.
Yeah, I don't have the ability to record meetings on Teams, so it would have been Christine. And I want to say, I think it was recorded. So we could have it available for people to look at a later date.
Okay, that would be helpful. Send that out. If you do have it, Craig, with the poll, you could send us the link. So, all right, is next up update on the non-motorized plan, Joni? We've got about 20 minutes left for.
Yeah, that's just a quick update anyways. So we have the non-motorized plan. So we are in negotiations with the contractor on a revised scope of work. So we are adding a little bit more money to the contract to finish out the project so that they can appropriately respond to the 700 and plus 62 plus comments that we received during the public comment period. So they have presented us the scope of work, and I sent it along this morning for approval. And so we're going to move forward on that. Once we get that approved, it'll be about 6 weeks. An estimate once our contract amendment is approved and by purchasing, it'll be about 6 weeks for the consultants to do all of the work. So that typically isn't the long part. The contract approval part takes time. So we are going to try to get that through as fast as we can. But that's where that's at right now. I did also want to say that we met with Scott Thomas last week, the consultant. Kim and I met with him to talk about the majority of their comments on the non-motorized plan. I just want to shout out a big thank you to Scott. He went through the plan in detail and provided a bunch of great updates on stuff in the plan that we did not have time or the scope to do while we were doing it. So for example, he provided a ton of updates on the pedestrian plan, the 2000 pedestrian plan, which was noted by several folks in our public comments that needed to be updated. We didn't have the capacity to do that the first time around, but he took the time and did that for us. So I just want to say thank you to Scott. That was a lot of work and effort, and the plan will be a lot better off because of that and more informative for people. The other thing was he was able to show us where, so our data that we used for the non-motorized plan was the Vision Zero data, which was the most current data that we had to use at the time, given we started the plan about 4 years ago. And since that time, DOT has gathered more recent data in the form of the HSIP data, the Highway Safety Improvement Program data. And so two things is great about that. So we have additional data to let us know where we can highlight some other corridors that also need improvement, safety improvements. But also it opens up another funding pocket for us to fund future pedestrian and bicycle improvements, because the HSIP comes with its own funding source. And so we're going to highlight those in the plan that Scott helped locate for us. And then we can include those and they can be called out in the future for funding potential. So that'll be really good. So I know we talked about some other things at that meeting, Scott. I'm just trying to keep this like a brief update, but if you have anything to add to that, feel free to jump in. But otherwise go ahead, sorry.
Just thank you for taking all that info, because like you've talked about with Craig and Aaron, that you have to stay on budget and fiscally constrained, but we've been able to come up with 8 projects and almost $28 million in the last few years. And I just hope we can continue to do that again and help you find a way to get to some of those you can't get to, but in the high crash area.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Again, thank you so much. And Kim was very impressed. I was really impressed too with all the time and effort you spent on that. So we super appreciate it. That's the update with the non-motorized plan. So again, once we get our contract approved, we're looking at about 6 weeks on to have a final document that will then go before the policy committee for final approval, I believe. I don't think we'll need any other work sessions on it or anything like that. And it will become an adopted plan. And then just the last thing on our list before we get into the committee comments and public comments, just an update on other AMATS planning projects. I don't have too much to tell you right now. I do want to say that we are wrapping up some content for the it's not Bike Life Anchorage, the Urban Streets magazine. So I just want to we're running a little bit behind, but just want to do a last call. If anyone has any ideas or things that they would like in that magazine, this probably will be our last magazine, because we're actually the only city that's left that's doing the magazine. So I think we're going to try to do a really good one this year and have that be our last one, at least for the time being. So if you have anything you'd like to showcase, now is the time to do it. Again, we mail it out to 40,000 folks, and then there's an online version as well. That's up for a year. So that's it for me. And then we're on to committee comments.
Let's check for any questions on those 2 last updates. All right, hearing none. How about if you have a committee comment, you raise your hand using the little functions, icons, and I will call on you. Otherwise, I will assume you don't have a committee comment to share. And we do still have some time, so please share. Lindsay.
I always have a comment. Anyone else want to go first? How about Chelsea? I'm going to kick it over to you, Chelsea, and then I'll come back later.
Thanks, Lindsay. Thanks for all the presentations this evening. It was really helpful. It would be great if we could maybe put action items at the front of our agenda so that we could sort of talk through those. I hate to not have time to sort of discuss, you know, Craig's option when that is coming up for deadline here. And while Aaron's presentation was great, it was a 30-minute presentation for something that I think a lot of us probably have some baseline awareness of and is not an immediate comment deadline. So if we could just work on formatting the agenda so that we're focusing on, you know, sort of the most pressing things first, and or the things that are going to require the most sort of thought and conversation by the group. And would love to get more links and resources in the interim in between our meetings, since we're only meeting quarterly. You know, would be great to see some more of these documents or resources. It's awesome that you guys are putting all those together and that you have, you know, a presentation on these criteria already recorded so that we can go watch that at our flexibility. And I don't mean to be super critical. I just know that everybody's time is valuable, and I really appreciate attending these meetings. But yeah, just think we could maybe focus our time a little bit more specifically on action items. And I just also wanted everybody to be aware. Oh, sorry.
Sorry, Chelsea, this is Joni. We do have the action items first. They're always first on the agenda. Was that what you were saying? That we only had one action item, it was first up. No, I missed your point.
I think she was.
I think I was more
hoping for more of an action item on the tip criteria.
Oh, okay. Okay, gotcha. It was an informational item tonight. So yes, I'm just looking through my emails now because I know I sent out an email about the tip criteria when it was approved. So I was just trying to find that for everyone and resend it, but I hear you, Chelsea.
We probably could have been clear on the agenda to say tip criteria, schedule work session. With the time that we had, there wasn't going to be enough time. I mean, it was, as Aaron said, at the CIC, it was a 2-hour meeting. So we weren't going to have enough time to really, you guys are smart enough and connected enough into this that this was not going to be a quick, let's just hear them and then move on. You're going to need time to chew on them because you know them well enough. So
right.
We'll just try to be a little more clear in the agenda next time.
Yes, absolutely. And I will say real quick, sorry, in my defense about the work session on the non-motorized plan, I did a doodle poll on that a few weeks before, and that was the date that the committee chose was the Friday before the comments were due. So we did try to schedule that earlier. That was a committee decision to have it on that date. So that's all I'll say.
Yeah, I guess my comment is leading to sort of a larger picture issue. I was just trying to put together some public comments for something recently, and realizing just how challenging it is for me as somebody that I feel like I try to be, and I'm not as much as I could be because I also do other things, but I try to be really tuned into all this stuff, and there are just so many moving pieces that even, like you said, Joni, if you try to schedule something a few weeks out, turns out that we can't get to it till the day or two before. And just as was presented this evening, you know, there's like the 85th percentile to keep track of, and then there's the MTP like every 4 years to keep track of, and then there's the CIP and TIP and STIP on top of all of that. It's just like, as somebody who cares a lot about this and wants to be involved and wants my comments to be heard and, you know, to have an impact to make our community better, it's exhausting. And and one of your criteria on that front page was just like, or I think it was maybe part of the MTP, even I can't even keep track of the things you just presented to us, was like access for the community. And so I apologize. I'm not trying to point fingers or think that it's you all as staff members on this. I just think that there's a lot of moving pieces around all this. And so I feel badly that I'm as exhausted trying to keep track of this in my position with the privilege that I have, and the opportunity to be involved and to sit on this committee, and to think about that for like an average member of the public, that we really want to hear their opinion as well. They're the ones out using the roadways every day. And so I just, yeah, I guess, yeah, I'll stop because I think my comment is a little bit circuitous here, but feeling a little bit flustered this evening with the amount of information and knowledge that is coming at us and that we're interested in commenting on, but also only have so much capacity to do so. So I'll stop there.
Chelsea, this
Sorry,
is Craig.
Lindsay.
Your point is extremely well taken, and we, you know, we always strive to get better, and we know we can always get better. And as you so aptly put it, you're someone who's got an insider view of all this, and you got overwhelmed today because it was an overwhelming amount of stuff that we just dumped on you. So I will apologize for part of that. I've been out of town for several different reasons, good, bad, in the last little bit. And so I didn't really get a chance to see that the tip criteria was on here. And I would have asked Joni to phrase it a little different. So that's on me. That's not on her at all. So, but your point is very well taken, and we'll just continue to do better, because if the folks that are on this call that are people in the know and insiders can get overwhelmed by it, I know that the average public member is completely overwhelmed. So I know we need to get better. We just got to continue to strive to improve.
Thanks, Craig. And again, I'm not trying to be critical on any particular staff or your program in general. I know that it's kind of like a transportation thing, and it also applies to other industries and areas, but it just one of those nights where it's just getting to me. So thank you for letting me voice my concerns.
Absolutely. Any of you can call me anytime you want and voice your concerns. I will always be happy to take your call.
Thank you, Craig and Chelsea. It does look like Lindsay, you still have your hand up?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And just to add on to this, we've known the tip criteria has been coming out for a long time. And it came out in July. And so there's a lot of opportunity to schedule our work sessions outside of when we have our actual committee meetings as well. So we can, like everyone said, we can do better because we know that these things are coming up and they're complicated. And one thing I wanted to comment on tonight is just thinking about the number of pedestrian deaths that we've had in our community this year. It's already hitting a high for our city compared to the last 10 years. And we're in September and October, which seem to be the months of the year where we have the most pedestrian collisions and then the most pedestrian deaths. And so I would just urge AMATs, and we've got folks from the DOT here, like doing some more education campaigns, especially at this time of year, as the light changes, is whatever's happening that makes this the situation, we need to have more of a public campaign around it, because we're seeing people dying in our community and we haven't made many changes, if anything. And so just even a public awareness or education campaign is just a start. And it's something that's really concerning. And even sitting here on the BPAC, you know, when we talk about all of these long-term planning processes and project-specific changes, they take a long time. And so we need some changes right now in our community. And, you know, I'm just trying to think about more ways to get the BPAC engaged in that, to find ways to make change happen sooner than later, because we don't have that much time for our neighbors. And so that's on the heavier note. And I do want to share just a more positive project where we're celebrating our community for the Fish Creek Trail project that it's one of our multi-use trails through Spenard and Turnagain. We are having a community project to bring storytelling, arts, culture to the trail system. And I'm hoping that it can be something that could be tested out here and replicated elsewhere. So if you're interested or want to spread the word about it, I'll add a link into the chat to share it out. But we really want to just, you know, celebrate the parts of our community where there are lots of strengths, and we need to improve and make our community safer where we know people are. So thank you.
Thank you, Lindsay. I don't see anybody else with their hand raised, so I will take that as no more public or committee member comments. We did receive a letter just today, some of us, from a community member, and it was about a resolution promoting NACTO affiliations and guidelines, and I forwarded that on to Joni, and Craig has it too, and both of them will respond on our behalf about that letter. So if you got that letter, you can ignore it for the moment, and the response will come from our AMATS team. And Craig, you'll let us know your response.
Yeah, I'll have to take a look at it. I mean, I got it, I guess, but I didn't have a chance to look at it today. This is a person who's commented on a lot of stuff before, and usually in a profoundly negative manner and not very constructive. So I'm just going to assume it's in a similar vein, but we'll see. We have very clear directions from our administration from years ago, the Department of Law, about how we can and cannot respond to him. So I'll have to take a look at it and see what it says before I can tell you for sure how we will comment on it.
Yeah, I mean, you'll just let us know that you took care of it, that we as committee members aren't responsible for engaging and responding to this individual. Is that correct, Craig?
That is absolutely correct. You don't need to spend a second more time for it. If anyone wants to see the letter, I can share it with you, and you'll see what a charming individual he is.
I think it's already been shared with the group.
Oh, did everyone get it? Okay, awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we were directly, and so typically if we are contacted directly by a community member, we as BPAC members are responding on behalf of BPAC to that individual. The AMAT staff will do that on our behalf with our input or not, but I'm just kind of giving you those guidelines. I did respond that I did receive it because I'm chairing today, and I feel like he had sent it knowing that we had a meeting tonight, and mentioned if we had a moment, which we didn't because the agenda was set well in advance to discuss it, we would. But since we won't be meeting for another quarter, I feel like an email through the AMAT staff might be the best approach.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'll just say real quick, this Joni, yeah, I'll always make sure and check in with the BPACers, or well, not the BPACers, with at least Craig, because sometimes we do have folks that are emailing in or commenting that we have been requested by the MOA legal team to funnel all of the responses through. So it just helps us keep track of all that and do what they would like us to do with those comments. So, but thank you for responding, Carol.
Yes, I work in government. We always respond, maybe not with the answer everybody wants, but I have acknowledged that somebody will respond. So, Lindsay, you still have your hand up. Did you have? Nope. Yes. Any more comments?
Oh, no.
All right. Nope. Eric, can I get a motion to?
Do we want to, did we ask for public comments? I don't know. We have a gentleman here. Do you have any? No.
I have no comments.
Okay.
Great. Oh, thank you, Joni.
Sure.
Anybody want to move to adjourn?
This is Eric. I move to adjourn.
Excellent.
We got a second out there? I heard a second. So no opposition? Or with no opposition, we're adjourned.
Thanks,
you,
Carol.
everybody. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks all.
Thank you. Good to see you. Yeah.
It's been up a long time, so I couldn't engage a whole lot.
I know, it was great. Thank you so much for showing up. The lone BPACer.
Thanks for the presentation.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Thank you, John. Okay.
Okay, so we have a recording going. We have to make sure we capture
we have to have
it.
Craig. Did Craig stop it?
Oh.
Oh, wait.
It should stop on its own.
Okay, I'm just texting
But
him right now.
I'm worried about, okay, I'll leave here and see what it does.